Mic volume test. Checking the latency.
Before your life was so boring. I got up, went to work just to get back home and repeat. Before you, I just felt nothing. I didn't dare to take risks. Now we be staying up all night. We don't have to sleep cause we're crazy in love, yeah. Oh, even if we start to fight, we know we can work it out, baby.
Alright, I think we're gonna get started. Alright, so like it said in the title, we're going to be doing a photo editing stream. I have a competition coming up at the end of the month, and I have a bunch of photos I have to edit. So I figured while I'm editing one, I might as well include whoever wants to come in and watch. And then I can also post this later, you know, as a normal editing video for whoever wants it. So obviously, the program I'm going to start with is Capture One to get my raw file into a good spot, and then I'll bring it over into Photoshop to do the rest of the work. Just because this is for competition, I can do whatever I want to the photo. I don't have to keep it realistic in any way, shape, or form, which is actually really nice. So I can do whatever I want, and we will have fun doing that. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. I will answer any and all that I can. Also, if the music is too loud or too low, let me know so I know how to adjust it. I just did a quick test on my laptop and it seemed to be coming through okay, and my voice seemed to be coming through okay on top of it, so you'll just have to let me know if it's too loud or not. Alright, let's see what we have going on here. So we'll just go ahead and start with the image. The first thing we're going to do is adjust our overall exposure. So we'll start over here. I do know one thing we want are the shadows. Definitely shadow detail. And I definitely want to bring down the highlights just to reduce that bright shine on its face. And then using our histogram, we're going to make sure that there's nothing being clipped, which I will turn on my exposure warnings. We'll bring up the overall lightness, and then we'll bring the blacks down just a touch. Now, the end result of this image is going to be black and white, so obviously we're going to make sure it looks good, but I know it's not going to stay in color. It's going to go straight to black and white. So I'll do a couple of these adjustments in color, and then we will actually transition it over to black and white here in Capture One. Normally I do that process in Photoshop, but since I know this is going to happen, I'd rather do it over here because I have a little bit more control over exposure and whatnot within the raw file itself. Alright, so let's see. I go into color, let's go ahead and turn it black and white, and let's do it, I think I can do it on a new layer just so we're not affecting anything else. Enable black and white, there we go. And now everything else I do, I'll do on a layer above it or potentially a layer below it, but in this case we'll do everything in a layer above it. And then we will right click and we will fill. So now the entire mask is full, and we will call this exposure adjustments. This way I can actually see what I'm doing for the photo. Alright, let's see here. So now that we're black and white, we are going to bring up the shadows a little bit more. And we're going to bring those highlights and those whites way down. I'm also going to pull the contrast back because I know I'm going to give it more contrast in Photoshop. And then the blacks definitely go down a little bit more. Let's pull the highlights back up just a little bit. It was getting a little too crunchy in its face. Let's see if we adjust the brightness a little bit. All right. So now also I want to bring out some of the detail in his coat a little bit more. But let's go ahead and look at the before. Oop. My before and after not working? Well, that's not fun. Alright, so we'll just do that for now. Or after. And the highlights need to come up a bit more. It's too drastic of a change. There we go. Alright, so let's call this one coat shadow detail. And then we'll make sure everything looks good. Alright, so what we're going to do here is we're going to fill it to start, just so I can see what we're doing. And then we're going to pull up the shadow quite a bit. Say about right there. And then I'm going to clear the mask. Alright, then using the brush tool, I can come in here and paint it in where I want. And I have got to turn that off. Let's only display mask, never display mask. Alright, so this way I can kind of see what I'm doing. Let's lower the flow a bit. Alright, and basically what I'm doing is going into the darker areas of the jacket to pull some of that detail back out. And I am only wanting it to affect the deep dark areas of the jacket, like you can see in that collar there. This area of the hat. And then we will use the mask in a little bit to look for bleed over. But for right now, this is going to allow me to keep detail, because that's one thing that judges look for a lot of, is detail. Especially in the shadows. That way, they know you didn't clip anything. The moment they think something is clipped, they automatically take points off of the image. And that's not a good thing. Definitely do not want points taken off of the image. So we'll zoom in. Back to our brush tool. Yeah. We'll shrink it down a little bit. See if we can't pull some of the detail back here out a little bit. Ooh. Tablet's being a little finicky today. That's okay, we'll work through it. We won't be in Capture One all that long. Oh, I see what's happening. Okay. All right. So if I do my before and after, before and after, you can see it's just bringing up those super dark areas of his jacket and his coat. All right, now let's go in. I think that shadow on his nose, let's see if we can't adjust that shadow on his nose just a little bit. It's a little harsh. Let's lower the flow even more. Turn off auto mask. And we'll just lighten that up ever so slightly. Don't want to go too crazy. Plus, I can always lighten it up more in Photoshop. But as I've said before, it's much better to do it in RAW because you have a lot more information to work in. So RAW really allows you to pull it out. All right. And then one thing I'm going to do, make sure that there's detail in his face. We are going to keep it kind of high key on his face. We are going to add a lot more contrast to the right side of his face in Photoshop, just so I can control that shadow a little bit more while we're there. So I think I'm ready to take this over into the cleanup stage. Obviously, I can always come back into Capture One if I need to. Let's see if I create a clone variant. I just want to see if I pull the exposure up. Okay, it's not showing the shadow areas more. All right, that's fine. Okay, so let's go and take this into Photoshop. Export this into my master folder and export. So now we're going to go into Photoshop, where we are going to continue to edit this photo. All right, now that we're in Photoshop. Nice. This is where some of the tedious stuff and the fun stuff comes in. So first off, I'm going to create a new layer and we're going to call this cleanup. Here is where I'm going to go through the entire image and clean things up, like these dust particles that you see all over the jacket, some of these little things on his face, on his hand, blemishes, imperfections. We'll probably get rid of some of these gray hairs, which they're probably not gray hairs. They're probably just hairs that caught the light or just lighter colored hairs. But obviously we went black and white with the image, so they look gray here. So the first thing we're going to do is take care of all of these little white spots that you see going on. So I'm actually going to use my spot healing brush for this. We're going to make sure it's the hardness is to about 100%. Now I am using pen pressure, so I can control more or less the size, because you really only want the size of the brush to be about the size of the area that you're fixing. So like these little dots that I'm getting rid of, you don't want them to be the brush size to be too big, because you just want to remove those small areas and blend it into the surrounding area. If you go too big, you could potentially get some bad repeating patterns because you're having to clone too much of an area when you just need to clone for a very small part. Now obviously this is probably the most tedious part of the whole process, but it is important to do, especially for a competition, because the judges are going to be looking at stuff like this. A normal portrait, I probably wouldn't do this much as you're going to see me do, but for competition you want the image to be as perfect as possible. And we're just going to jump around here a little bit. Clean that up. This hat had a lot of fuzz. You also want to try and clone and heal in the direction of whatever it is you're fixing. So like these stripes right here, you don't want to go across like that. You want to go kind of follow it up and down if you can. Photoshop should do a pretty good job. Sometimes it does mess up. For the most part, the spot healing brush for stuff like this that doesn't have to be too detailed, it's perfect for. I use this for everything from what you see now to hair, background elements, that kind of thing. I don't use it on skin as much as I used to. I use the normal healing brush on skin, but that's because I like to be able to choose the area of the skin that it's going to be healing from. That way I can choose the right texture, make sure it's getting the right texture. So we're just jumping around the hat here. We're gonna spend a couple more minutes cleaning this up, and then we'll move on to the jacket. All right, let's see. All right. So we are looking pretty good on the hat. All right. So we're just gonna start moving down and cleaning up as much as we can. Clothing like this is really cool, but it unless you dust it on set or when you're taking the photo, it just collects dust, and it doesn't help that we're going in black and white either. The only good thing is we can see the white specks a lot better. I mean, and the trench coat was black to begin with, so obviously all this stuff was gonna happen and get picked up. This part of the process is exactly why you have music playing, or some kind of TV show in the background or something, because it is very tedious. But sometimes the most tedious things are the most important. This is also why most tutorials people speed it up, because it does take a while. And once you see someone demonstrated it a few times, it really a simple process, just a bit time consuming, and it really depends how much you're going to do. I mean, you can either spend as much time or as little time doing this as you want. Really personal preference how much you want to clean up. But like I said, because this is a competition image, I'm going to try and clean up as much of it as I can. Bum 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 bum. Getting all the dust and lint, whatever else it is. It also didn't help he had been wearing this coat all day, and I wasn't the only one that shot him that day, so it was just picking stuff up. And obviously I didn't shoot this for competition. I didn't know I was actually going to use this in competition. This was just a group photo shoot I was at, but I liked the photo so much that I decided, why not enter in competition? And we will keep going. Some of this stuff I'm going to also smooth out using frequency separation. I just like to do as little in that step as possible. And the spot healing brush is just a nice, quick, easy way. to get rid of this kind of stuff in non-important areas such as the face. Because you can just go over it and it's just gonna manipulate the texture around that area to clean it up. In most images, no one's would ever know that we did any of this. It doesn't really leave, as I say, it doesn't really leave trace behind. All right, so that's gonna be a problem area. So we're gonna switch to our healing. We're gonna heal from the edge. Okay. And that takes care of that. Just so we keep the coat edge pretty defined. You don't want that to just go away. Alright. So we went down one side of the jacket, and now we're just gonna go up the other side. I try and focus only on one section at a time, that way I don't miss stuff. Obviously you miss stuff all the time. And then as I go back through one side, I'll come back, jump between both places to kind of clean it up. I'm also looking for things that maybe look out of place, like if a button like this looks odd, go and get rid of it. Doesn't need to be there. The judges aren't gonna know, or anyone, no one is gonna know that it was actually there to begin with. Also, like I said before, if you have any questions or whatever, feel free to ask them and I'll answer them as best as I can. Alright. I think we're pretty good with this side. And then we're about to go start the other side. Now, on most of my normal portrait work, I wouldn't be, like I said, I wouldn't be this detailed. But because this is a competition image, I want it to be as clean as possible. So like here, I'm gonna get rid of that button because it's distracting. All right. Work on this cuff of white specks. All right. Ooh. Stray hair. All right, let's clean up this collar a little bit. Get rid of these white specks. And we are going to get rid of this white speck right there. I'm not quite sure what that is, but it doesn't. All right. I think we're looking good. So, this isn't as drastic of a change as the hat was, but it's giving us a much cleaner coat. All right. So now I'm gonna do facial cleanup, skin cleanup. So we're gonna come in here. We're gonna use our normal healing brush. And this is where I'm gonna clean up the other different areas that I think need work. This is also the step that I use sometimes to get rid of veins if I don't want veins. Mostly I do that in women's hands. For him, I'm gonna leave the veins in because it's gonna add to the grittiness of the photo. And that is a toy gun, so we may come in and clean this up a little bit here. I'm probably just gonna have to do is cloning one side, flipping it around. But it is a toy gun. And we're just gonna come clean up some of these blemish areas. Blemishal, I don't know if that's a word. Bring that down a little bit. Like I said, I always try and work. Oop, missed a spot. So let's come and clean this up here. And let's see if we can't get rid of some of these. Alright, so the hairs aren't going to cooperate. We'll probably get rid of those in the frequency separation step. So, we are going to leave some of the grittiness to his face. Because it's going to fit the portrait very nicely. Just because of the mood of the photo. But we are going to clean up as much as we can in this step. Oops. Okay. So we'll get rid of that in frequency separation as well, which I think we're probably going to go into. Let me see while I'm thinking about if I can't fix this gun barrel. Let's well, first things first. Let's duplicate it on its own layer. Oopsie. So that way I can come in and do some quick retouching on it. Blend some of the inconsistencies of his paint job. Alright, so for this we're actually going to use our spot healing brush. It's going to do a direct clone, which I think is what we want in this instance. Okay. So then what we are going to do, clean up this edge, a little bit more defined, getting rid of some of the imperfections. All right, so let's see if we can't clean up the front part of this barrel also. How do I want to do this? All right, so let's try something. Let's go to a normal brush. Hardness of 2. Let's change our flow to about 15% for this. I'm going to sample this black. And I'm going to round off the barrel just by simply painting the area. Because it's just black, I don't have to worry about the texture and all that stuff, because you're not really going to see it. And then we are going to take the gun itself, the barrel, and we're going to clone the texture around the rim. Alright, so we'll merge. Oops. We'll merge. So then what we'll do is we'll take a sample of this area right here. This is a pretty good clean area. If we need to clean up some more, we can. Take it and flip it. Place. Knock it down to about 50%, and we can kind of see where we go. Obviously, we can create whatever shape we want with this. Put a mask on it. And then we're going to paint the mask away from the areas we don't want. This is going to be a multi process. I'm going to do it again. Got the thing. Okay. duplicate that same layer. We'll delete the mask that we did. Let's give 70%. Kind of see through it. We'll rotate that again. This time, about like that. Put a mask on that. Then we'll paint away the excess that we don't. Going to manipulate. Okay, that's not that layer. That is from this one. That's from the original barrel. So what we need to do is kind of clone that area out. We're gonna take our spot healing brush because all we're gonna do is come in here, clone trench coat into the barrel just to get rid of it because we don't want it in there anymore. Because we have the other pieces that are taking over for it. So now if we turn those two back on, see what other work we have to do. So this needs to come in just like that. Pull that that way. We'll take this, pull it into it. Out a little bit more. I'm gonna paint the excess away. Okay. So now we're gonna merge all those down, and then we're gonna use our spot healing brush and see if we can't clean up these little black areas. I'll just blend it in. Now obviously this is a small part of the image, but I don't want the judges to kind of ding because we didn't take care of something. All right, so now what we're gonna do, use our clone stamp, paint this white into those areas for the shine. All right. So if I turn that layer on and off, you can see how messy the gun barrel looks. And now, oops, how clean it is. So I have my before and I have my after. Before and after, before and after. Perfect, right? All right. So now we're going to go into our frequency separation. So in order to do frequency separation, you have to kind of flatten your image to apply it. I don't like to flatten my image. I like to work as non-destructively as I possibly can, and flattening your image kind of stops that from happening, which is not a good thing. So what we are going to do, second while I just check something. So what I am going to do is an action I made. What it does is it does a image duplicate, and then on the new, it creates a copy, and then on here I just flatten everything. I just select everything and Control E, and it flattens it all into one thing, ready for me to apply the frequency separation. Now for frequency separation, you can Google it. It'll tell you how to do it. Obviously I have an action, well, a plugin that does it using the surface blur method rather than a Gaussian blur, but I recommend starting with the Gaussian blur method until you get it down, and then you can kind of change it to what you like, because it really is personal preference which one you want to do. I find that the surface blur method works best only for the fact that it doesn't blur over edges. It keeps edges intact, so you don't have to be as careful when you're actually doing the frequency separation part of things. All right, so to do this, I'm going to get my frequency separation plugin, And we're just going to hit a default value. What this plugin also does is give me a side-by-side view, so I can see how much detail is going onto the detail layer and how much is staying on the color layer. So as you can see here, not a whole lot is going onto the detail layer, and there's still a ton of stuff on the color layer. We don't want this because using frequency separation, we want to separate our detail from our color, so we can go in and smooth out the color without messing around with the detail and the texture. So what I'm going to do here is adjust my radius till I get more texture on the texture layer. Okay, so we're getting there, and as you can see, we're getting less and less texture. So then we're also gonna up our detail threshold. Oop, now we're getting somewhere, but that's a little too much. Really bump up that radius. For him, I want a lot of his texture to stay. And I don't have to worry about color transference here. Now I am getting some weird stuff here. So we're gonna see what happens if I lower this. I think we're almost there. Let's bump up this radius a little bit more. Okay, so we're hitting some diminishing returns here with this method. So let's go ahead and apply that and see how it does. If this method doesn't work, we'll switch over to the Gaussian blur method. Alright, so if you did it right... What is... Oh, that's just his neck. Alright, we'll have to liquefy that out, I think. Because... yeah, it's just a shadow. We'll go in there and remove that after. Actually, we might be able to remove it in this step. Alright. So now we have our high, transition layer, and then our low layer. Because I'm non-destructive, we're going to duplicate our low, we're going to duplicate our high. We're going to clip it to the other high texture, which makes it go wonky, and then we're going to turn that to normal. This way I can edit on another layer without disrupting the original layer in case I have to delete and start over, which does happen. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is turn off the texture layer. And then we're going to come into this low copy layer and we're just going to kind of smooth things out. So I really am going to get rid of this. So for this, I'm going to use our mixer brush, because the mixer brush is going to blend everything together. So it's just going to simply blend all of this together. And then using Liquify, we'll come in and we'll adjust the shirt. So that, and obviously we'll create a hard line right there so it makes it look like it's the shirt collar, which we will do in Liquify as well. But this step, all we're going to do is we're blending stuff together. So I know there's some texture here and we're going to kind of leave that just to see how it looks. I don't want to get rid of it. But in little areas like this, we're going to blend. Now obviously this is somewhat of a grittier photo. So, and I do a lot more blending on female photos than I do male photos. Men, it's a little bit more acceptable to keep it as grittier. But we are going to clean up certain areas, smooth some transitions. And basically all we're doing is painting. We're blending pigments together. Just to get rid of some of the harshness. And again, you can do as much or as little of this as you want. For him, we're not going to do a ton because we want to keep some of that grittiness. So as you can see, we're just softening some stuff in his skin. And this may actually be a better candidate for the Gaussian blur layer. So we're going to do that. now that the surface blur layer wasn't working as well as I had hoped. So we're going to do the Gaussian blur method. And we just have to be a little bit careful, because this method can get very... Now, your values for this is going to change based on your image, your megapixel count. There's too many factors for me to determine what your exact blur ratio is going to be. So you're going to have to kind of determine that for yourself. All right, so we'll apply that. I think that's going to give us a bit better. All right, so now, same thing. We are going to remove some of the bags under his eyes. And we're just going to smooth things out. Just blending things together. So. This just gives us a bit cleaner skin, and then the texture will help it keep that grittiness that we want for this particular image. This just cleans up some of those harder transitions. Makes it look a little bit better, a little bit cleaner. Up under the eye. Let's back out a little bit more while we're doing this. We'll get a bigger view of the image. We can kind of see what we need to clean up a little bit more. I want to keep this shadow on his cheek. And we'll smooth this out. We'll smooth this out. And this is just smoothing out transitional areas. This isn't, like I said before, for guys, it's not, so if we do it before and after, you can just see we're just cleaning up those shadow areas. We're blending colors together. It just creates a cleaner image for the final result. But again, we're still going to retain the grittiness. Normally on females, I would come in and I would actually fix more of this up. And we are going to pull the shadow more in this way to darken it down. Manipulate it. So if we look at the before and after, you can just see we're cleaning up his face. And we are going to get rid of that thing on his face. Now that I'm looking at it, it doesn't need to be there. We are going to darken this side of his face down, but that doesn't need to be there. That's probably just the brim of the hat stopping the light from from wrapping around properly. So it just looks off. This up. All right, so if we turn that back on, all right. So now all I have to do, for him, there's not much else I have to clean up. We don't need to clean up around his hands. I like the grittiness in his hands right now. We are gonna do a little bit more on his chin right here though. That's just a little too dark and it can be blended a little bit more, just to get rid of some of that. How black it is. We want it to be shadow, but we don't want black. Kinda transition. Alright, that shadow underneath his chin is perfectly okay. So our before and after. Before and after. And we're gonna smooth this out a little bit more. So we're gonna stay at this view because the closer we zoom in, the harder it is to see these changes that we have to do. So I'm just gonna come to the edges of that color, and I'm just brushing back and forth real quick to blend it in with the surrounding area. So it's taking the color from one area, blending it into the other. There we go. Much smoother. Okay. And then let's drag that to our master image, and then we can delete that. So now we went from this to this. Just such... his face is just so much cleaner now. Alright, so let's see what we can do. The next step should be dodge and burn, only it's not. We are going to fix this little neck issue that is kind of bothering me. So we're actually going to fix it a different way. I decided I don't want to use Liquify. So we're going to just take this collar part right here. Actually, let them cloning. We're going to take our clones, right? And we're coming here. Ooh, make sure it's set to current and below. So we're on a new layer. And then we're just gonna, this doesn't have to be perfect, as we can come in and clean it up. We're just gonna come right down. Okay. And then we'll just come here and remove the collar, fold there. And we're going to use a healing brush here in a second to smooth this out a little bit more, since we're using the clone stamp, which is just taking a copy of. Okay. So now it just looks like his chin. And then we'll clone. Alright, so what we're gonna do is create a bit more of a defined line. Let's see the best way. So what I need to do is create a defined line here. Oops. Going into collar. Yeah. And we'll clean this up there. Very carefully. Do that. Alright, so it still looks a little weird from far away, which is the only thing that we need to worry about, is how it looks here. So we're going to cut this in even more. We'll cut it to about right there. Then we'll take this. we'll take some more of his skin. And then we'll take this and just redo a lot of this little work. Take some time and finessing, and boom. There. So now, instead of that, we have that. And then we're going to liquefy his face out. So now, create a full duplicate of it. Do a filter, liquefy. We're going to zoom right in. Going to enlarge my brush a little bit. Just going to pull that out. Okay. We're also going to see if there's anything else we want to liquefy. So add a little bit more volume to his trench coat. Pull it out over here. We'll give him broader shoulders. And I'm just doing little adjustments. Okay. We'll tuck his waist in a little bit. I'm sure he'd appreciate that. Not that he's a big dude by any stretch of the imagination. Okay. So after the liquefy, before and after, we just add a little bit of dimension to his coat. Just makes him stand out a little bit more. And we need to fix his waist because that was a little too much. We'll just go back into filter liquefy, not reapply liquefy. I got a little aggressive in here. And we're actually going to shrink this down. The lines. Okay. All right. So now something I forgot to do was his hairs, but we're gonna go ahead and try that with a spot healing brush and see if it should take care of any issues that we have with these hairs. I should have done it in frequency separation, but I forgot as it happened. All right. Come over here. Not gonna remove it all because again we want to keep some of the grittiness to this image, and sideburns kind of fit the image just a little clean. All right. And obviously we lost some detail there, so we're actually gonna use our gilding brush, and we're just gonna pull some of that texture down. Oop, nope. Let's use our spot healing. It's on a low flow, so it's just pulling in some of the texture from different areas. All right, looking good there. So overall, before, after, before, after. All right, so now what we're gonna do is dodge and burn after we save, because the last thing we want to do is lose all the work that we've just done. Alright, so the save is done. Nope, save is not done yet. The only problem with working with a 16-bit file is it takes forever to save. It's even on an SSD, so go figure. Alright, so here we go. Dodge and burn time. So let's do, I guess we're just gonna do a general dodge and burn first. And then we'll how do I want to tackle this? Yeah, let's just do targeted, and then we'll do a global. More global anyway. Alright, so we are going to have this beauty retouch panel. It's going to give me a dodge and burn curve setup. It has this helper layer, but because we're already in black and white, I'm not going to use it. So let's go ahead and open this up and we'll start. Now, some people don't like using the curve method because it requires you to jump between two layers, but I personally don't mind it. I like having more control than less control. Also, I'm using a normal brush, black and white paint, because we're just going to be painting on a matte layer mask, so you're mostly just going to be painting white, so you don't have to keep jumping between the two. And I'm going to do a flow about 2%, so I have full control over what I'm doing. So we're going to start with dodge, and I'm not going to get super close. I am going to put a little triangle of light right back here on his face, just like Rembrandt. It was there before, but I got rid of it, remember? So now we have a nice little triangle of light there. And I'm gonna continue going through. I don't need to dodge the side of his face because it's already light, and I don't want it to be lighter. So we're gonna leave that side of his face alone. We will dodge that a little bit. We will dodge this shine just a little bit to bring it out a little bit more. His hands are the same way, and we're actually going to take his hands down. We're going to dodge his hands down so that they aren't as bright as this part of his face. Because his face is where we want everyone's eyes to go to. And your eyes always go to the brightest part of the image. But what we are going to do is come in here and do a little texturing. And all we're doing is painting over the areas of the jacket that are already in highlight that we want to pronounce. You don't have to do every area. And again, I'm using a pressure sensitive tablet, so the size that you're seeing on the brush isn't the actual size that I'm painting, because I can control the size based on the pressure. So I'm especially accentuating some of the highlights on this darker side of the jacket to help bring it out. And then let's accentuate this side of his. Just the edges of the coat. Okay. Now we're going to come into the burn. The burn is we're just going to darken areas that we want to darken. Maybe create some more contrast. So we are going to come onto this side of his face and just darken it down. Now there is a little white spot here, so we're going to try and darken that down. We're also going to darken his ear down, because no one really cares to see ears. They're just kind of there. Then we are going to darken this area, his face. And then we're going to run a pretty strong darken here. And we're also going to come in here globally and darken his face down. To create that mood shot. Especially when I want it more even. So something we are also going to do is create a hard line right here. So we're just going to really, really darken this down. Let's darken down the collar right here. And then we're also going to darken and actually lighten some stuff on this gun. Out. As I said before, this is a toy gun. The cosplay prop that he has, so there's no, it wasn't real. It was spray painted. I think he said it was originally orange or something like that, and he just has a whole bunch of this spray painted these kinds of props that he brought with him. It just made for a really cool photo. And I'm making a conscious decision to leave some of those nicks in there because I don't want it to look super real. And hopefully I don't get dinged for that too much in the judging, but hey. And then we're gonna dodge his hand down. First we dodge down the dark areas of his hand first. And we'll bring the light areas down a little bit later. I want these shadows on his hands to be really deep. Really deep shadows. Create the mood. And then we're also going to come into the shadow areas of his shirt, darken them down a bit. And again, we're just darkening in the places that are already dark. We're not necessarily creating new dark areas because that's not what we want with this. So if I turn that layer on and off, you can just see we're just adding a bit of mood to him, right? And then this is the dodge layer that we added. And then this is the dodge and burn layer. Alright, so let's go ahead and save that. Crack the neck to free it up a little bit. Alright. And we'll just wait for that to finish saving. And then we're going to darken down his hands. And then we're going to separate him from the background and start manipulating the actual light in the photo to create a more dramatic look. Alright, so let's go ahead and darken down his hands. So what I want to do is make sure I'm only affecting his hands. So I'm going to create a new curves layer. And then I'm actually just going to darken everything. Just so I can really see what I'm affecting. And to darken. Bring them down. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is double click and use these blend if sliders down here. So if you pull these, you're removing it from certain images. So as I'm pulling away here, I'm removing it from the shadows of the underlying layer. And that's exactly what I want. I want this to only affect the highlights. So now it's only affecting the highlights. It's bringing down the highlights. The thing is, it's doing it to the entire image, and I don't want it to do it to the entire image. I only wanted to do it to part of the image. So that's where the mask comes in. Now, I do like overall what it's doing to most of the image, right? It's actually doing a fairly good job to most of the image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave that there. I'm just going to paint black on the areas I want to bring back. And for this, I'm going to use about a 10% flow. And then I'm just going to paint the effect off of his face and the hat, because I want the hat to kind of stand out a little bit. I don't want it to be toned down. So if I turn that on and off, his face isn't touched, but you can see it's bringing down those light areas. And let's actually take it off of the gun too. We'll leave the highlights on the gun. Being careful not to try and not touch his finger. All right, so that brought that down, and then we'll turn the layer off, and we'll slowly bring it back till we find a layer that till we find a level that I really like. I think that's a little too much, so we'll back it up a little bit more. All right. So all we're doing is making sure his face is the brightest part of the image compared to everything else in there. Let's go a little bit more. And I'll probably keep adjusting this until we're actually done with the image. All right. Well, I won't be able to adjust it after this step, but that's okay. All right, so we're going to create a duplicate. And then what we're going to do is separate him from the background so we can manipulate both elements independent of each other. So we're going to do select subject, one of the best things Photoshop has ever come out with, and it's going to give us a nice selection around him. Now, because he doesn't have hair, we really don't have to go in and do too much, except for maybe fix his ear, which we're just going to use the polygon lasso tool. Oops. And we're going to add his ear to the selection. There. Now his ear is added to the selection, and we're gonna go through the image, try and find any other weird instances. Like right here, for some reason it didn't pull in the rest of his trench coat, so we're just gonna manually add it in. And my hand just got tired there. Okay. So then let's clean up little areas around here. Ooh. It really created a mess in this area, huh? Alright. And then we need to deselect this area. And yeah, I could have used the other selection tools, but cleaning with this, gives me a little bit more control. If it's a super big deal, I will use the pen to get a much cleaner edge. But I don't foresee me needing to do that for this. Most of the stuff that we manipulate is gonna be a global manipulation anyway. I just want to have the option, if I need to make adjustments to the background independent of my subject, so I don't have to keep masking stuff off of him. And when you're doing a lot of editing, something like this seems a little tedious in the beginning. But if you're going to be doing a ton of manipulations, especially in color images, like if you need to change the color of a background and whatnot, you don't have to keep masking off of your subject. This just makes it a little bit easier. So right here, what we are going to do is use our polygon lasso tool, because we don't have to be super precise. And we're just going to select this. This works very well on clothing. You don't have to be super accurate. But the good news is our select subject got us most of the way there. It's just not perfect. And it's also because this image is black and white, so it doesn't have clear contrast line between the jacket and the background. It is kind of blended together. Double click. But it's still better than me having to go around and pen tool his whole body. And I'm just looking at the little scratchy areas, really. Alright, so we're going to switch back to the other tool, because I think up here it's just these... I did not switch. So we're gonna go back to these. Oops. There we go. Oops. Come on. Don't touch the space bar. Clean these areas up. We're good. Yeah. All right. Oops. Almost. Nope. Nope. I thought that was a pocket. It is not. It is part of the jacket. All right. So then, all we have to do, duplicate him. Now we have him on the top layer. So then what we're going to do is we're going to hold control and select that top layer, which is going to load that selection. We're going to select it. We're going to expand it by about 2 pixels. Now this is on the bottom layer, on the original layer, because what we want to do is have a clean background to work with. So we're going to remove him from the background. And so using that selection, we're going to come and edit content aware fill. And we'll let it do its magic, and boom, he's no longer in the photo. And I'll hit OK. Now what this will actually do is create another layer on top of this one. So we're gonna have 3 layers, which is really nice. So again, we're editing fully non-destructive, which is the only way to edit. Not really, but it's the only way I like to edit. So now I turn on 3 layers, nothing's changed. Okay, except for the fact that we now have in between here a clean background layer to work on. What I am gonna do is I'm gonna take those 2, duplicate and merge, and then I'm going to throw these into a group and name these background backup, just in case I need them for something. So now we have our subject, and then we have our background, which won't actually disappear because everything else is turned on below it. And then let's go ahead and save that. I always save because the last thing I want is for maybe power to go out or something like that and I lose everything. Not fun. Very not fun. Saving, 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 saving. The longest part of the whole process is saving. Oh yeah, my camera's covering up the saving bar, huh? That's okay. Alright, so we're saved. So now we can manipulate things differently. So the first thing I know is I need to bring the light areas of this background down a little bit to create a greater separation between him. So what we're going to do between this layer, we're going to put a curves layer and we're going to drag it down. So pull that. Ooh. I think I really like that. Make it very punchy. Yeah. And we'll get rid of the contrast just a hair. So we've fully done that. And then something else we'll do is we'll put a gradient. Let's do a radial gradient. Okay. We'll set it to soft light. And just to create a little bit more separation between him and the background. And I think that's a gray color. Oh, we're actually, excuse me, gonna make this lighter. Okay. So in those 2 steps alone, we've brought everything into him. Okay, so then what I'm also going to do is take this layer and move it on top to also brighten him up a little bit, but it's going to be to a lesser degree. Okay. So let's go ahead and do a little cleanup here and just group all that stuff at the bottom so we don't have so many layers visible. And now I'm going to darken the right side of his face quite a bit more. And we may actually be done with this. A little touch there. Background darken there. Save it. Well, I can go ahead and set up the new layers. Alright, so we're going to do this layer, and this is going to be a little weird. So what we're going to do is we're going to come into his face in black, glow of 2%, and we're literally just going to paint black. Okay? Now this is going to seem very weird, because I'm literally just painting black. Just various levels of black. And I'm not being very careful with it either. I'm gonna show you why in a second. A cool little trick I learned, and we'll put some on the ear too. Okay. Alright, so what we're gonna do here is then fade this so that it only affects the shadows. So double click on the layer, and we want to remove it from the highlights. So this is going to remove it from the highlights. Okay. So holding Alt, I'm going to separate these sliders. So now it's only affecting the shadow area, right? And obviously that looks really bad, really fake. So we're going to knock it down to soft light. Okay. Let's zoom out a little bit more. And then we'll just bring it up just a bit so it looks a little more shadowy. So about 58, maybe I don't need that much. Let's do about 24%. All right. Nice darkness on that side of the... That's our original. So now I think I may need to adjust this, but we'll see. I kind of like leaving it Rembrandt style. Alright, so one thing I am now noticing is the face over here is kind of really blown out. So I think we're going to try and bring that down a little bit too. And we're going to, let's see if a curves does it better than that method. I don't want to do it too much. Put a point there. Alright, let's do something drastic, because I need to be able to see what I'm doing. And then we're going to pull it out of the shadows like we did before. Okay. And actually, let's see if we can just put it in the highlights. So it's only really affecting the highlights that we want it to affect. Okay. So this time we're going to invert that mask. And then we're going to paint it. I'm going to avoid his eye. Let's do 10%. Then I'm just going to paint white, not the crop tool, onto his face. And again, I don't have to be super careful, except around his eye, because it's only going to be in the lighter parts of his face. Okay. Alright, so now his face is a little too close to his hands. As far as lightness goes, so now I can pull this up and adjust. Just a hair, I think. But before and after. Just bringing it down just a bit so it doesn't look super blown out. Now what I may do is bring his hands down a little bit more, which because we flattened it, we can't, right? Well, I can use that same layer once I find it again, where I brought his hands down originally, and I can duplicate it and bring it up. Okay. So again, it's doing it to the whole image. However, this time I only wanted to do it to his hands. So I am going to actually fill that mask with black. Okay. And then I'm just going to paint it onto his hands. That way I can just independently darken his hands. From everything else. And then I think we will raise the opacity of this a little bit to darken it down just a bit more. Yes, I know. And then we'll just paint. Okay. All right, getting there. And now let's just add a finishing touch because I think we're almost done. So I'm going to do a full-on flatten. Again, not flattening. I'm just creating a snapshot layer. And then there's, where is it? Is it render? Vanishing point. Man, I guess I could always do it in the camera raw filter, but I remember there being stylize. There was something where I could do lighting. Why can't I remember it? Give me 1 second. You know what? Maybe they got rid of it. Doesn't make sense because it adaptive white lens correction, liquify vanishing point, shape. All right, hold on 1 second. No, let's go back here because his face is now that I let my eyes adjust to something else real quick. I think I may leave his face the full brightness. Yeah, we'll just delete that. Then we'll create our snapshot. Okay. Let me see here. Google is your best friend. Photoshop lighting effect. Filter render lighting effects. Filter render. Oh, it's grayed out. So it can't work in 16-bit. All right. Image. Duplicate. Yes. Layer. Let's just flatten everything. Edit. Mode. Oh, yep. Let's knock it down to 8-bit. Filter, render, lighting effects. We'll even see if this is something I want for it. If it's not, then we'll go back to the 16-bit. All right. So I should be able to now take this, create a type of spotlight effect. Just to add to that noir look. All right, let's see how that looks. Oops. All right, let's see how this is gonna play in the 16-bit file. Yes, I know. So all I'm gonna do is gradually fade it in. All right. I think that just adds a little something to the image. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put this into a presentation. And what that means is like the finishing touch. Anything for competition has to be added into an actual presentation. So here we go. I need to go find my presentation. Files. Let's see, where did I... We'll just open up another one from one of the other images I'm using. Yeah. All right. So this is one of my other images I'm using for competition. We're just going to use this to place the image for the presentation. Once this is done saving, anyway. The more and more we do to the image, the longer and longer it takes to save. Okay, so it's saved. I'm gonna create a flattened snapshot. And I'm gonna drag it over onto this pasteboard. Yep, that's okay. Different bit depth. I'm gonna convert it to a smart object, and delete the other three underneath because they are not part of this image. I'm then gonna close this down to save memory, because yeah, it's a big file. All right, so we have this here. I don't think I need to change anything yet, so we'll go and save that, and then we're gonna drag it into this image. And then we're going to line it up where I want it. Now, have a little play, but I think we are going to go about right there. All right, so I also have this background, which I'm going to change. I think we're going to leave the color the same because it works very well with the black and white. But we are going to possibly go a little bit darker with the outer border. And then we're gonna do a different texture here. So let's just pull that texture already there, and we'll use exposure. I used Nick. Oh, I used alien skin. Okay, so let's open up alien skin. I forgot I used alien skin. I thought I used Nick. All right, so these are... I want to reset everything, and we're just going to apply a texture. Oh, it's just going to put it on top of it. Okay, so we're going to need to do a clean background. I'm going to discard. We will let's just black this out, and then go back to alien skin exposure 5. So we'll turn on the texture, and we're gonna send it to lighten. Let's do scratches. Brushed jade. We'll do those scratches. So we'll delete that one. and for whatever reason it is now not showing. Oh, because it's 10%. Let's adjust that. We'll bring up the background just a hair, and we'll bring that down a bit more. We are gonna put it back on screen though. And then readjust this because that was the wrong direction to take it. Okay. All right. Then we'll do a save as so we don't overwrite our image. And let's call this Noir. And that is our final image. This I'm working with a mentor for this, so I'm actually going to send this to my mentor, and then she'll give me any advice and tips to clean it up. So any future stuff she gives me to work on this, I'll try and live stream it. If not, I'll work on it off stream, and then I'll make sure I show it either in a video or something like that. So we were able, let's go and open up the original image. Actually, let me save my JPEG and my PNG. And then after those save, I'll open up the original image and we'll show where we started from and where we ended up. This will just take a minute to save out. I think the PNG may actually take 16-bit PSD file does to save out. Oh, saving this is very taxing, huh? Looks like it's giving my stream some problems too. I think my camera cut out there for a second. All right, we'll have to be a little bit more careful when I may have to do the PNGs off stream. It's that kind of glitching again. We'll see. Eventually I'll have a separate computer for streaming, and this one will be for editing, but all right. So that's done. So let's go ahead and open up my original. So this is where we started. This is where we started, and this is where we finished. Before, after. Before, after. Pretty cool, huh? All right. Well, that's going to do it for me tonight. I'm going to try and stream again sometime during the week because I have another photo I have to edit. I actually have 3 more photos I have to edit for the competition and, you know, get them judged and stuff. So I want that last week to be able to do any edits that my mentor tells me to. So thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you all later as I figure out how to adjust things. I'll eventually get the hang of this. All right, guys, see y'all later.
I'm running out of time, every day goes by so fast. And every moment counts, baby, I don't wanna miss a thing. We can sleep under the stars, we can sleep under the stars, or hang out in hotel bars, driving somewhere in your car.